Hey everybody, and welcome back to another video where today we're going to be continuing our BFA dungeon series, taking an in-depth look at the Motherlode. Okay, so I just want to take a quick second just to make a visual note of our route through this dungeon using Method Dungeon tools. You end up getting 97% of your trash completed before you hit the second boss. Now this is really efficient because it means that via 2 death skips later on in the dungeon, you actually end up getting most of your reapings just in these first couple sections here, which means really good consolidation, really good time efficiency, and it also means you can kind of just keep pulling trash. I also want to briefly mention how we're actually going to be getting this percentage. So I notice a lot of people when they do Motherlode, they actually prevent the mech jockeys from jumping into these mechanized like peacekeeper suits, right? And this is really bad. I calculated, I think there are 9 mech jockeys and 9 peacekeeper suits in this section here, which means that you actually end up skipping about 3 or 4 additional packs that you would have otherwise had to kill in the dungeon, which is just a really good time saver. Okay, now working your way through this dungeon, from the onset, we're going to be pulling the first 3 packs and just bloodlusting, right? There's so much trash in this initial stage that if you can just get your bloodlust on cooldown as quickly as possible, it just means that you're going to blast through the dungeon a bit quicker. Now, also while I'm kind of going through this, I want to just highlight the key mobs in this dungeon that you want to look out for. Do you see these refreshment vendors doing this iced spritzer? This is one thing that you need to prioritize and interrupt, right? It's going to end up doing a lot of damage, especially in higher keys, and it ends up freezing one of your allies, so less damage overall. So make sure you interrupt that on cooldown. So the next mob that you want to kind of focus interrupt is the Hired Assassin. The Toxic Blade that they periodically do can be quite difficult for your healer to kind of break through if they can't already dispel it, as well as the Fan of Knives that the Assassin will periodically do. You want to try and like Typhoon that or stun it, anything that will kind of allow you to do so. I like to just save my Maim or my Shadowmeld Rake for those kind of instances, being a Feral Druid and all. The one thing you don't want to really bother with is the addled thugs that do their Enrage. Just get your, I mean, chances are you guys are going to be playing meta specs, right? So you're going to be getting your Resto Druid just to soothe that, or, I mean, I'm a Feral Druid, so I'll soothe them as well. You don't really want to be wasting interrupts on something that you can just soothe. So what you end up doing, going into the first boss, is you kill trash until your Bloodlust is off cooldown. Then you kind of time it with the boss so that you'll get here for when your Bloodlust is off cooldown. You kill the boss, bloodlust with it, and then you go back and keep clearing trash from this, the section 1 of the dungeon. There's not really many tips on this. Just don't stand in front of it and throw the bombs at him. You can kind of do a neat little trick where you get one of the range to hold on to one of the bombs for a few seconds and then finally kick it, which kind of just means that you have higher uptime of increased damage. But really, it doesn't have massive impacts. Just burst him down as quickly as possible. As I mentioned about, after killing the first boss, going and killing more trash in this first section, we actually forget to do so, and we end up going on to the next section. But we quickly realize and just turn around and go and clear more trash. Okay, so by this point in the dungeon, going into this second section, you should hopefully be at around about 60+% of your trash done. You should have had about 3 reapings by now. And the next mob that you really want to focus interrupt here are the Earthshapers with their Rock Lance, right? That hits very hard. And even on a Fortified week in a high key, even just the rock throw, or the throw rock, can also really hurt just the DPS. So be very careful of this. This is in the dungeon where we ended up accruing quite a few deaths. So just make sure you're quite careful with that. And as you can see, we're doing these packs 2 at a time. If you're really confident in your group or it's a lower key, you can even maybe do 3 or 4 packs at a time. Okay, so now just before this second boss, we end up rogue shrouding. You can also Warlock Gateway or even just Death Run. It's definitely worth it, especially when those mobs are on a fortified week. They can be quite time consuming to kill. With this boss, our Bloodlust is up in time to use with it, which I would definitely encourage, which means that you'll have Bloodlust available for the final boss. Okay, now we're going into our first of 2 death skips here. You want to make sure that if you're on Horde, you definitely have your battle reses available. So if people die earlier on in the dungeon, you kind of just have to force them to run back. If you're on Alliance, you do have access to Shadow Meld, obviously assuming that somebody in your group has Shadow Meld and can also res. So this third boss is actually quite a meme on lower keys, and especially on Fortified, but once you start getting into the 20, 21, 22 level of Motherlodes, this boss on Tyrannical Week can be very difficult to deal with. The reason being, you end up being so overwhelmed by these Azerite patches on the ground that you end up having no room to move. So try incorporating, if you're at this stage, a kind of stacking rotation with your tank, and try and all position yourself in a way in which you face these Azerite patches so that the Propellant Blast, as you can see here, just pushes all of the goop out of the way. So going into our second of 2 death skips, you want to be very careful here because this one can be quite difficult. It's definitely a lot more incoming damage than the first death skip, and you can end up having to actually just wipe it and go again. You may have noticed by this point of the dungeon as well that we're not actually following the route that I displayed at the beginning of the dungeon using the Method Dungeon tool. Sponsor me, by the way. So the reason being is that I was just trying to show off a good standard route that you can employ. We end up using a slightly different route, but in all honesty, it kind of works out roughly the same anyway. So on this final boss, there are 2 things you really want to be looking out for. It's the Gatling gun and then these helicopters that are flying around and kind of rearranging. If your tank is really good, they will be making note of these positions and moving the boss out of the way. Like you can see here, we're in absolutely no danger of being killed. Okay, so going into the death of this not so clean last boss, you can see we do end up depleting this key, but by a very, very insignificant amount of time. It's very close, just a slightly cleaner kind of few pulls. We would have completed it in time. Even so, I still think that this route and this method of doing this dungeon is very, very solid and will definitely see you having some good success. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this dungeon overview. If you have any comments, if there's anything I missed, anything that you guys use in your own runs that you think is really, really good, or anything that kind of I missed off, please get in the comment section or jump into my Discord or even catch me on Twitch. I'm probably live right now as of the upload of this video. So definitely just come check it out and you know, let me know what you think and anything that I can improve on. But I hope you guys enjoyed this one and look out for the next video coming your way.